Get ready, because today we're going to talk about 10 of my favorite movies of all time. And what we're going to do, we're going to talk about why I love each of these movies. We're also going to talk about the biggest flaw in each movie. I did this in last week's video. I went 1 through 10. Now we're going 11 through 20. A lot of people like the previous video, so I thought, let's have some more fun. Let's analyze some more movies. By the way, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of Entry Wounds, which is about a haunted gun that once you pick it up, you can't put it down till you kill 6 people with it. If you want to learn more or pick up your copy today, check the link in the description below. All right, let's get right to it. Number 20 is one of my favorite action movies. It's one that I talk about on this channel all the time. In fact, sometimes people joke around in the comments and they say, oh, it's not a Brandon McNulty video unless he talks about John Wick. And John Wick 1 is one of my favorite movies out there. I love it to death. And I was very fortunate to go in completely blind. Like, I didn't actually watch the movie until like 2 years after it came out, but a friend of mine recommended it to me and he's like, Brandon, I think you'll like this movie, John Wick. It's really stylish, just check it out. And that was the only thing I knew about the movie going into it. I didn't know he was like this famous assassin and that everybody in the underworld feared him and all that good stuff. But I just went into the movie, I saw like, okay, it's Keanu Reeves, okay, he's mourning the death of his wife. Oh, he's got a dog, and then next thing you know, they kill the dog, and then next thing you know, we get to see that he's this well-regarded assassin, this guy who just kills everybody he wants to. And watching this movie for the first time and going in blind was just such a thrill ride. I was not expecting the action sequences to be that amazing. Like, I kind of got like the feeling early on that it was going to have some juice to it, like there was going to be like some fight scenes and things like that, but I mean, the club shootout in the middle of this movie is probably my all-time favorite action sequence. It is just unbelievable to watch. Everything he does when he's pursuing Theon Greyjoy, trying to go after him while fighting off all these different members of the Russian mob, it's just one stylish, cool thing to watch, one thing after another. And another thing I got to point out with this movie, I love the world building in it. I just talked about this in a recent video on my bad versus good world building, but it is so well done in terms of just being economical and making you curious about the world, making you curious not just about John Wick, but about all the people and all the systems going on within this universe. And that's what built this franchise up to be so much more than a series of action movies, that world building. As for the biggest flaw, I went back and forth on this. I think one of the major problems with it is that the movie peaks in the middle. Like that club shootout sequence I just talked about, it is just so thrilling that the rest of the movie just fails to top it. It's one of those, like usually when you tell a story, you want things to just get better and better and better and better until you get to the very end. But I think with John Wick, it peaks right in the middle, and then the rest of it is just kind of trying to catch up to it in terms of like excitement and, just thrill value. But the other issue I have with this movie is that toward the end, it just feels like it reboots itself. I know, like, when John Wick kills Theon about, like, 3/4 of the way through the story, that's, like, his big journey throughout the story. It's about getting revenge on Theon, who killed his dog earlier in the movie. And then after that, Theon's father, Vigo, he retaliates by killing one of John's friends. Then John has to get back at Vigo, and it just, the whole revenge back and forth toward the end, it works. Like, I'm not saying it's like terribly written or anything like that, but it just feels like the conflict is rebooting itself, and it just didn't have the same smoothness to it that the rest of the story did. Number 19 is the most recent movie on this list. I love it to death. I've talked about it before, and it's Godzilla Minus One. And sometimes you see movies that just hit you at the right time. Like, you need a certain movie at a certain moment, and it just comes to you, and you're lucky enough to just, be there at the right place and the right time to enjoy it. And that was the case with me when I saw Godzilla Minus One in theaters a couple years ago. When it came out, there was a lot of hype about it. People were saying like, oh, it's the best Godzilla movie, and that was what I went into the theater hoping for. I was just like, oh, I really want to see a good Godzilla movie. Let's see Godzilla tearing apart a city or fighting other monsters or whatever it is. And I went into the movie completely blind. It was like, if I know I want to see a movie, I will not watch any trailers. I will not read any reviews. If like people tell me like, oh, it's great, go see it, like that's enough for me. And I will just go in blind and take it for what it is. And what got me from the get-go, right off the bat, we're introduced to this main character, Shikishima, and he's this kamikaze pilot who doesn't want to go through with his job. He doesn't want to kill himself trying to take out any of the Allied ships or anything like that. So he pretends to have a malfunction in his plane. He goes to this island for repairs, and that's where he and his people, they get attacked by Godzilla. Right off the bat, we get Godzilla. We don't have to wait for him in this movie. And that's such a brilliant move here, because instead of having Godzilla as this distraction throughout the movie, like, oh, when is Godzilla going to show up? We get him right from the bat, and we get to focus on Shikishima and his personal problems. His cowardice leads to the death of many of his fellow soldiers. Then on top of that, he has to live with the shame. And the shame was what I really connected with over the course of this movie. It was just something, at the time when I saw it, I was going through some shame in my own life. It was bothering me, and it was just like, it was like this miracle that I saw a movie that just reached out for me like this and just pulled me along for 2 hours. His struggle was my struggle as he goes through, and he goes through this rebuilding Japan. He is stalked by Godzilla. Godzilla keeps popping up and ruining his life and forcing him to eventually dig in his heels and make some sacrifices and redeem himself. As for the movie's biggest flaw, I actually talked about it in a recent video on the worst sci-fi cliches, and the problem in Godzilla Minus One is that toward the end of the movie, they have this lengthy scientific info dump about how they're going to take down Godzilla. And after most of the movie was just either, heavy emotion or heavy action, or there was, something interesting or intriguing going on screen, they had this sequence where it's just a bunch of scientists and military guys talking about their plan for taking down Godzilla, and there's this little like 6th grade science project demonstration going on, and it was just such a low energy scene for a movie that otherwise had been very high energy and high engagement. And I wish they had maybe cut back and forth between like the demonstration, and then maybe they actually put it in practice, like tested it out in the water or something like that, something to just spice things up and keep things fresh instead of just having people standing around talking. Number 18 is Spider-Man 2. And I grew up with the Tobey Maguire movies. I remember seeing the first movie in theaters was like a mind blow, because I was a kid who grew up on the Spider-Man animated TV series in the early 90s. Like everybody talks about Batman the animated series, and rightfully so, it's amazing. But also the Spider-Man animated series was amazing too. Like I was just blessed to have grown up in the early 90s and waking up on Saturday mornings to see this and everything. And I ended up being like a huge Spider-Man fan as a kid. And when they finally had the live action movies, it was like, oh wow, you get to see Spider-Man and it's real, and it was just so much fun. Then a couple years later, Spider-Man 2 came out, and it took a different approach to like superhero stories. And I mean, the internet has discussed this to death, but I think what really makes Spider-Man 2 amazing is because it's so human in how it approaches Peter Parker. It's not so much about him as the superhero, it's about him as the human being and the struggles he goes through, the burden of being that superhero, and having essentially this thankless job where he's putting his life on the line and putting his his well-being on the line in order to help people, and how that affects him over time. As for the movie's biggest flaw, this is going to sound weird, but I gotta go with Dr. Octopus. And more specifically, the problem I have with Doc Ock in this movie is his motivation. And what happens is, when there's that crazy experiment in the early part of the movie, and all of a sudden his wife dies and everything's out of control, and then next thing you know, the special scientific brain chip thing that keeps his mind in order, that gets damaged, and then he's all of a sudden off the rails. I'm just not a fan of when characters are just made crazy by like an event like this, or some kind of thing like this that just justifies their motivation over the course of the story. Like if he had just naturally gone down the path of villainhood, I think that would have been more interesting. But here it's just like, oh no, his little protector chip is broken, and now he's just out of his mind, and I'm just not a fan of that. Number 17 is The Godfather. And I have a pretty weird relationship with this movie. This is something I've watched several times through the decades, and the first time I watched it, I was not really impressed with it. Like, I was 14 years old. It was during the summer where I got into like Lord of the Rings and the Rocky franchise, and I was looking for all kinds of great movies, and I wanted to watch like the best of the best and things like that. And of course, like The Godfather is often regarded as like the best movie of all time. So when I watched it for the first time when I was 14 years old, I was like, it was interesting to me, but I didn't fully engage with it. Like, I mean, let's face it, I was 14. There's only so much you can appreciate about a movie like this when you're a kid. And the thing was, like, there were certain aspects of it that I did love. Like, I liked Michael Corleone's his whole arc, and I loved the bathroom scene, or excuse me, the restaurant scene where he comes out of the bathroom and he shoots McCluskey and he shoots Salazzo. So I mean, there's so many things I did like about it, but at the same time, it was like this 3-hour movie that was really like taxing on my attention span. And I remember, like, for years I just thought, like, it's overrated. I don't really like The Godfather that much. It has its moments, but it's overrated. Then fast forward to when I'm in like my mid-20s and I watch it again for the second time, and it's like, okay, that was better. I think I can see why people like it, but I still don't love it. I still don't think it's that great. And then when I watched it for the third time in my early 30s, that was when it really clicked for me. That was when it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. And I think what really helped make it click for me was I finally watched it with subtitles on. That makes a huge difference in the movie because there are so many names and so many things thrown out over the course of the movie that, like, I think if you're just watching and listening, you don't really pick up on everything. But if you have the subtitles on, it makes a huge difference. You see all the names of the different mob bosses and mobsters and mob groups and whatever it is, and that helps you pick up on things. But there are so many things to love about this movie from a writing standpoint. I mean, I could go on and on, but I think one of my favorites, and it was a great observation that I came across when I was listening to a podcast last year. I forget what it was called. Maybe I'll link it in the description below or the comments section, but the podcast talked about why The Godfather stands out from all the other mob movies out there, especially the ones that came before it. And it was the fact that it has this strange tenderness to it. Like, the characters, like, yes, they are mobsters. They are, they do some horrible things, but they're also family men, and they take care of each other. And there's this tenderness to them that really humanizes them and elevates the story as a whole. As for the biggest flaw, I gotta go with the pacing. And it's not in the way you think. You might think, well, okay, it's a 70s movie, it's long, it probably feels long, and sure, maybe it does at times, but I think the real issue I have with the pacing is that, especially on the back end, certain things are just rushed. And one thing to keep in mind with The Godfather, it opens up with like a 30-minute wedding sequence where we get to meet all the characters. We're brought in very slowly into this world, and it's some fantastic world building. And then over the course of the first half of the story, we see the Corleone family, we see where Michael stands within this world, and we see like how his brothers and his father operate and everything like that. And then everything builds toward this moment where Michael tries to avenge his father's assassination attempt, and he takes down 2 of the people who were involved. Then in the second half of the movie, it opens up with this slow burn where Michael is hiding away in Sicily. He ends up getting married. He gets attacked out there. Meanwhile, back home, his family is getting attacked. So things are happening at a pretty steady pace. Then when Michael returns to America, that's when things start really picking up. It's like this whirlwind of events. He starts this rise to power that just, it feels too quick for me. And I think like I like there's like the Vegas sequence, and then next thing you know, he's planning to take out the heads of the 5 families, and it all just happens too fast. And I think it's something that when you rewatch the movie, you appreciate it more. But definitely, like, the first couple times I watched the movie, it was just way too quick, and I think it prevented me from enjoying it as much as I could. Number 16 is The Terminator. And we have to call it The Terminator. We can't call it Terminator 1, or else that guy in the comments section will come after me. But this movie, I love it to death. It is exciting. It is engaging. There are so many cool things going on in terms of the sci-fi ideas, the action sequences, the character arcs, seeing Sarah Connor go from this everyday waitress to this warrior. It's just such a blast to watch from start to finish. And it's also the only James Cameron movie that doesn't overstay its welcome. It's well-paced, it's exciting, it knows when to quit, and it's just, there's so many great things I can say about it. Now, as for the movie's biggest flaw, I gotta go with the third quarter of the story. There's like a noticeable lull in terms of like the energy during this sequence of the story. And yes, you need some cool down periods, especially after the epic and exciting police station shootout. Like, yeah, we definitely need some cool down period here. Let's get to know Sarah and Kyle a little better. Let them have their love scene. Let them, learn how to make weapons and things like that. That's great and all, but this particular section of the story is just noticeably lower in energy than the rest. The third quarter just doesn't have that same flavor to it. And, maybe in a way it's a good thing because it's kind of a palate cleanser, but it's a noticeable lull for me, and it just kind of takes me out of the story. And whenever I do rewatch The Terminator, I'm always saying to myself, like, okay, we're at this section of the story. Things are going to be slow for a while until things kick up again. And it's not like the worst thing in the world, and we definitely need these character moments, but at the same time, this to me was always the weakest section of the story. Number 15 is Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I mentioned a little earlier in the video that there was a summer when I was 14 years old where I was getting into all sorts of my favorite movies at the time, whether it was Lord of the Rings or Rocky, eventually like The Godfather paid off somewhere down the line, but Lord of the Rings was really what kicked off that summer, and I had actually waited until all three of them came out before I actually got them on DVD and watched them back to back to back, and Fellowship of the Ring is easily my favorite of the three. Like, it's not even close. Like, I do like Two Towers a lot, but Return of the King, like, I'm always confused when people say that that's their favorite one, or they say it's the best, or whatever it is. I mean, I think there are some issues in Return of the King, but with Fellowship, like, this is just, it's such a fun story in terms of, from the get-go, you get the incredible world building, and this world just comes to life before your eyes, and you meet the hobbits and Gandalf, and they go on the adventure, and you're introduced to the ring, and you see what it's capable of, and like whether it's turning Bilbo invisible or drawing the ring wraiths to it. There's so many cool ideas going on. And then as the story progresses, you get to meet the rest of the Fellowship. You have the 9 guys together. It's just it's so much fun. And Fellowship also has what I believe is the best moment in the entire trilogy, and this is when Boromir sacrifices himself in order to protect the hobbits. It's a sequence that just takes my breath away. Everything about it just pays off in meaningful ways. And I love the fact that even though he does make this sacrifice, it's not enough, and that just signals that there is more work to be done, and other people like Aragorn have to pick up the torch and go forward and move towards, not just saving the hobbits, but the world as a whole. As for the movie's biggest flaw, I gotta go with Frodo. And the problem I have with Frodo in this movie is that he's just not interesting. Like, I think every other member of the Fellowship has something unique about them, something that draws me into them, that makes me care about them, that makes me root for them, or whatever it is. And Frodo is just like par for the course. He is just bland, he's boring, there's nothing really going on with him other than the fact that he's the main character. Like, if he weren't the main character, what is there really to him? He's just basically this character who wants to go on an adventure. He wants to go on an adventure similar to what his uncle did, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot of meat to him. He does have some great moments, especially during the Council of Elrond when, he stands up, he says, "I will take the ring." Like, that's obviously his defining moment in this movie. It's a great moment, but I feel like this moment is powerful not because it's Frodo rising to the challenge, but because it's the Hobbit rising to the challenge. And if Sam or Merry or Pippin were the main character, I'd feel the same way. It would have the same impact. With Frodo, it's just like he just kind of has the plot happen to him. He does react in some compelling ways, but he doesn't truly get interesting until the sequels. Number 14 is going to surprise most of you because this is a movie that is often regarded as the weakest in its franchise, but I mean, hey, this is my all-time favorites list, and number 14 is John Wick Chapter 2. And I can't tell you how much I love this movie. It is just like last week I talked about how Raiders of the Lost Ark is so watchable and rewatchable, and I'm always in the mood for it. And John Wick Chapter 2 is the same thing for me. I can watch this movie endlessly. I remember I saw it opening night, and I drove through a snowstorm to see it, to get to the Cinemark. And when I got there, within 10 minutes of the movie starting, I knew I already wanted to go see it again in theaters. I was just hooked. And I remember, like, right at the beginning when he goes to get his car back from the Russian mob, and there's all this action, and he shoots out the one guy's kneecaps, and I think that was the moment where I'm like, yeah, I need to go see this again already. And the rest of the movie, like, to me was just so cool because they built upon everything that was established in the first movie. And like, the first movie basically introduces you to the character and the world, and here we get all kinds of cool things going on, whether it's how the markers work, or different continental hotels. Then you have the rivalry between John and Cassian. You have the suit-up sequence, which is just hilarious. You have the action that just gives the first movie a run for its money. And I think throughout the movie, it was better paced, in my opinion, and I think it's just more watchable. I know some people complain, they say like, oh, he grapples too much, but I don't care about that stuff. I'm just there for the story and the fun, and to me, this is just one of the most fun movies out there. As for the movie's biggest flaw, I gotta go with when Morpheus appears toward the end. This is after John Wick is hunted down by all the other assassins, he seeks safe haven, then we get to see Morpheus and the two stars of the Matrix are reunited. And the problem I have with this is that it takes me out of the story. You know, it's cool to see the two actors back together and everything, but at the same time, it takes away from the character who, like, I forget what the name of Morpheus's character is in this movie, but it's a distraction from the story itself, and I think they just get too cute here. It also feels random compared to the rest of the story. The rest of the story is built upon setup and payoff, but this just feels like it comes out of nowhere, like, oh, here's this other member of the underworld, he's a major player, and since we don't have time to really introduce him, we're just gonna, plug in a familiar actor that has worked with Keanu in the past. And it just didn't work for me. It was always like kind of like a speed bump in an otherwise smooth story. Number 13 is the first movie I ever saw in theaters as a kid, and somehow my parents thought it was a good idea to take their 3-year-old to see Jurassic Park. And who am I kidding? It was a great decision on their part. I'm so lucky that my first ever theater experience, I mean, I still remember it. And I just remember, being a little kid and they take me into the theater, it gets dark, the previews come on and they're telling me, be quiet, you can't make noise. And I'm like, okay. And then next thing you know, the movie starts and as it gets into it, all of a sudden there are dinosaurs, there's all kinds of cool things going on the screen. I'm just completely gripped by this. And I will never forget, though, the movie, the moment that just absolutely scared me shitless was the Dilophosaurus scene. And being 3 years old, it is still tattooed on my brain, that moment where, Dennis Nedry, Newman from Seinfeld, he's throwing the stick at the thing, and then next thing you know, this seemingly harmless little green dinosaur all of a sudden turns into a monster and just lashes out. I remember just being terrified, just scared out of my skull by this thing. It has scarred me for life in the best possible way. But Jurassic Park, I've talked about it a lot on the channel before. It's just a great sci-fi movie. Just a lot of fun things going on. The characters are very underrated. They're not like the coolest characters or the most emotional characters, but they get the job done. They bring the themes to life. It's just it's an amazing story. And whether you're a little kid who watches it just for the dinosaurs, or you're an adult who watches it for the thematic back and forth between John Hammond and the different scientists and everything like that, there's so much to love about this movie. As for the movie's biggest flaw, I've talked about this on the channel multiple times before. I'm just not a fan of the ending. I'm not a fan of the T-Rex ex machina where it saves the heroes from the raptors at the end. Like when the heroes are facing down with the raptors, and then it's like, oh wow, how are they going to solve this problem? How are they going to outsmart the raptors? How are they going to save themselves? And then all of a sudden the T-Rex just explodes through the building and takes care of the raptors for them. It's cheap storytelling, especially because the T-Rex like silently shows up, like nobody hears the T-Rex coming. And I know some people, they argue that, it's perfectly fine this way because the story is trying to push forth the idea that, nature is in control, human beings can't control it and things like that. And I get what they're coming from, or where they're coming from with that, but at the same time, I can't help but wish that the heroes had done something more to get themselves out of this situation. Even if there had been a situation where they had lured the T-Rex toward the building for some reason earlier on, or there was some kind of setup and payoff there, but as it stands, where it's just T-Rex ex machina, that to me is the weakest part of the story. Number 12 is a movie that always makes me smile, and it's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, in my previous video, I talked about how my buddy Tom, he got me into the Indiana Jones movies. It was his 11th birthday. He showed us Temple of Doom. I got hooked. I was in love with it, and then a couple weeks later, I ended up going through my dad's VHS collection. I find Raiders of the Lost Ark. That blew me away, and then it was a little bit, maybe like a month later, when I found out there was actually a third movie. And it was interesting because Last Crusade was initially underwhelming to me as like an 11-year-old. Like I love Temple of Doom because how dark and crazy it was, and then Raiders was such a thrill ride. But with Last Crusade, that took some warming up to. But once I did kind of get a feel for it and watch it a few times, like it just became one of my all-time favorites. I love Last Crusade to death. You have this fun father-son story. You have the multiple betrayals from Elsa and from Donovan. You have all the different action and magic and all the other craziness. You have the return of Marcus Brody and Sala. I mean, there's just so many great things going on in this movie, and I think it ends so perfectly. I mean, it's the last Indiana Jones movie, and they just wrapped it up so well. As for the movie's biggest flaw, I gotta go with the 3 trials at the end, and specifically the fact that when you stop and think about them, they just get sillier and sillier. And they're hyped up over the course of the story, like Henry Jones Sr., he's always saying like, oh, you have to be prepared for the 3 trials before you can get to the Grail and everything like that. And the buildup is really exciting, it's cool, it's mysterious. And then when you get there, you see people, they're getting their heads chopped off trying to get past the first trial. Indy ends up, somehow getting past it because he decides to not only kneel but also roll. It's just kind of a silly thing. Then he stops the mechanism, and I think once you find out that it's a mechanism, it's like, really? Like, I thought it was like supernatural. I thought it was like some kind of like act of God kind of thing, but instead it's just these buzzsaws, and he stops them with his whip and everything. Then the second trial, he has to spell Jehovah, which in the Latin alphabet begins with an I, and he steps on the wrong stone first, and then when he crashes through, we see that there's nothing really supporting this thing, and you have to wonder, like, okay, well, how does this work? And like, it's just, again, it's like so illogical. And then you have the final trial, the leap of faith, which like, it's like this invisible path, but it is visible. And it's just, I'm just not a fan of it. I think they should have taken a more supernatural approach to it, especially considering that once he does get to the Holy Grail, I mean, the Grail itself has these supernatural healing powers. Or if you pick the wrong Grail, it has these supernatural killing powers. So the 3 trials, I think they just could have been done better. And I think, it would have been better if they had that supernatural angle to them. And finally, number 11 is Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. I was so close to putting this in my top 10 last week, and honestly, I was so close to putting a few of these movies that I talked about today in the top 10. I mean, making these rankings lists is tough. I mean, especially when you really love these movies. But Empire Strikes Back, for me, I'm the weirdo because I think A New Hope is the best Star Wars movie. Everybody else, it feels like, says like, oh, Empire's the best. Empire is the masterpiece. It's this, it's that. And yeah, it definitely has the highest highs in the franchise, especially like with the I Am Your Father moment. But for me, I've always been a New Hope fan. I just love, once it gets going, it is just this nonstop thrill ride all the way to the end. Whereas Empire is a different kind of beast. Like, it opens up with the thrilling Hoth sequence, and then in the middle of the story, things slow down, and we get to learn more about Luke, and we get to see him trying to master the Force while being tutored by Yoda, and we see Han and Leia rubbing off on one another, and their romance develops, and then finally things pick up toward the end when Han and Leia are in danger, and then Luke has to put everything in jeopardy in order to save his friends, and it's just, there's so many great moments. And then of course you have the big moment at the end where Darth Vader reveals that he's Luke's father. One thing I will say, I had that spoiled on me, so I wonder if I had watched Star Wars as like maybe like a 6 or 7-year-old or as a little kid or something like that, and I didn't know that, maybe Empire would be my all-time favorite movie. Who knows? As for the movie's biggest flaw, I gotta listen to my inner 12-year-old here, and I gotta say that the middle of the movie, especially like the energy and the pacing here, that to me is my biggest criticism. And it's a weird criticism to make because I think there's some really great character writing during the second act of this movie, but it's so hard to ignore the fact that the Hoth battle is so exciting and engaging and just mind-blowing. And same with the parts in Cloud City where, you have, and especially like the lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader, where it just feels like everything is at stake. And it's just, those are such incredible parts, like the beginning and the end, and then in the middle you have things slowing down, and it does need to slow down, but at the same time, it has always bothered me from the time when I was a kid. And I think even my buddy Tom and I, we always used to discuss this when we were kids, and we always used to say like, yeah, the middle parts, they slow things down too much. And again, there are some great character moments in there, a lot of great writing in there, but at the same time, it's so hard to ignore that drop in energy. And for me, again, it's a weird criticism to make, but I got to go with the middle of the movie. So I hope this helps. Question of the day: what is the first movie you ever saw in theaters as a kid? Do you still remember it? Do you still love it? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of any one of my books and be sure to leave reviews on Amazon. Story Made Simple is great if you're a writer. It covers the 8 key elements of storytelling, and it does so in no-nonsense fashion. Also, be sure to check out my other videos, like, share, and subscribe. Maybe support me on Patreon. Check my website if you're interested in one-on-one coaching. And as always, remember to keep on writing.